Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into something that might seem deceptively simple at first glance.
Oh, I know what you mean.
It's the parable of the mustard seed.
Yes.
You know, that little seed that turns into this massive plant.
Right.
But there's so much more to it than meets the eye, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
We're going to unpack why this story has resonated for centuries.
Okay.
And how its message about faith and growth
Yeah.
and, making a difference can still speak to us today.
I think it's fascinating, actually, that when Jesus first told this parable, it wasn't just a nice little story.
Right.
To understand its true impact, I think we have to go back to the historical context.
Okay, so paint the picture for us. What was it about mustard seeds that would have made this story so vivid and surprising for the people hearing it for the first time?
Well, imagine you're a farmer in ancient Israel. You're dealing with all sorts of tiny seeds, right?
Yeah.
But the mustard seed was notorious for being almost ridiculously small. Yet this tiny thing could sprout and grow into a massive plant, sometimes towering over a person.
Wow.
So when Jesus described this little seed becoming the biggest thing in the garden, it would have been a powerful visual.
It's like the ultimate underdog story, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And, our source material digs into this a bit, highlighting 5 key takeaways from the parable.
Okay.
One that I thought was interesting right away is this idea of small beginnings, great impact. It's easy to get caught up in wanting to make a big splash right away, but this parable seems to say that real change often starts small.
Exactly. Think about Jesus' own ministry.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't start with a huge PR campaign.
Right.
It began with a handful of ordinary people, some fishermen, a tax collector. It wasn't the most impressive crew on paper. But just like that mustard seed, their impact spread far and wide.
It makes me think about how even seemingly small acts of faith or kindness or courage can ripple outward in ways we might not initially see.
Absolutely. It's like a chain reaction where even a tiny spark can ignite something much larger.
And speaking of small things with big potential, our next point is faith as a mustard seed. This is one of those classic biblical metaphors that really packs a punch. What do you think is the core message here?
Well, it's not just about having a tiny amount of faith. It's about the genuineness of that faith.
Yeah.
Jesus says in another passage that even a little bit of faith, like a mustard seed, can move mountains. But it has to be real faith, not just wishful thinking or going through the motions.
So it's about that deep trust, that conviction that God can work through us even when we feel inadequate or like our efforts are insignificant.
Precisely. It's about believing that God can take our small offerings, our humble efforts, and use them to accomplish extraordinary things.
Okay, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
And this brings us to another intriguing aspect of the parable, the kingdom's expansion and inclusivity. I'm particularly drawn to the imagery of the birds perching in the branches of the fully grown mustard plant. What do you make of that symbolism?
The birds? Huh. I think they're often interpreted as representing the diversity and inclusiveness of God's kingdom. Think about it. Birds from all different species come together to find shelter and rest in this one plant. It's a beautiful image of how God's love and grace are open to everyone, no matter their background or beliefs.
It reminds me of how Christianity itself started small within a specific cultural context, but then spread outward, embracing people from all walks of life.
Right.
The mustard plant growing into this sprawling, sheltering tree is a powerful symbol of that expansion.
It is.
And it also kind of speaks to the unstoppable nature of God's work in the world, which ties directly into our next point.
Oh, okay.
The unstoppable growth of God's kingdom. And here's where things get really interesting, I think.
Oh, yeah?
Our source points out how mustard plants were actually known for growing in a way that some might even call aggressive.
Oh, wow.
They spread rapidly and were tough to contain.
Interesting.
It's like this metaphor for how God's kingdom keeps expanding, regardless of any opposition or challenges.
It's a powerful message of hope, especially for those who might be facing hardship or persecution.
Right.
It's like saying, don't give up. Even when things are tough, God's love and purpose will continue to spread and flourish.
Okay, so we've seen how something small can have a huge impact, how faith is about genuine trust, how God's kingdom is inclusive and unstoppable. But this last point from our source really brings it home.
Okay.
The power of transformation. We're talking about a radical shift from a tiny seed to a full-fledged plant.
Yeah.
What strikes you about this image of transformation, both on a personal level and in the wider world?
Well, for me, it highlights how God can work in and through us over time, shaping our character, refining our motives, helping us become more and more like Christ. Just like that tiny seed contains the blueprint for something much larger, God sees our potential, even when we don't.
Yeah, it's like we're invited to kind of trust in that process, right? To
Yeah.
be patient with ourselves, with God's work in our lives.
Absolutely. And, that can be a challenge, I think,
Yeah.
in our fast-paced world,
Right.
instant gratification,
Right.
We want things like now,
Yeah,
but real growth, it takes time,
it does.
nurturing, sometimes a bit of struggle even.
And it makes me think about how we get fixated on the bigness of things, right?
Okay.
The impressive accomplishments,
Yeah.
the grand gestures. But this parable, it seems to say that the seemingly insignificant can have incredible power.
Yeah, that's so true. It's like saying, don't underestimate the potential of planting a small seed, which, actually brings up a question that wasn't directly addressed in our source material, but it's something I find myself thinking about a lot.
Okay.
If the mustard plant represents God's kingdom, what are the seeds we might be planting in our own lives and in the world around us?
Wow, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it could be something so simple, like a kind word,
Yeah,
a helping hand,
right.
even just choosing to be a positive force
Right. Exactly.
in a world that can often feel negative and overwhelming.
Exactly. And sometimes those small acts of kindness, those seeds of compassion,
Yeah.
they take root and grow into something much larger than we could ever imagine.
And that growth might not always be visible to us right away, right?
Okay.
I mean, just like a seed takes time to germinate and sprout, the impact of our actions might unfold over time in ways we may never fully see or understand.
That's a good point. It reminds me that we're not always in control of the outcomes, are we?
Right.
We plant the seed, but it's ultimately God who makes it grow. Our job is to be faithful in the small things, trusting that God will use them for his purposes.
This has me thinking about all the people throughout history who started with what seemed like a small, insignificant idea or act of courage. They didn't start out, leading massive movements.
Right.
They started with a deep conviction and a willingness to take action, even when it felt risky.
What's fascinating is how those individuals often faced, immense opposition and challenges.
Yeah.
Yet, like that mustard plant that stubbornly persists and grows, even in difficult conditions,
Right.
they persevered, fueled by their faith and commitment to their cause.
So it's a reminder that real growth requires, I guess, resilience, right?
Yeah.
The ability to bounce back from setbacks,
Yeah.
keep moving forward, even when it's hard.
Absolutely. And, it's a challenge to us, I think,
Yeah,
to cultivate that same resilience in our own lives,
right.
to not give up on our dreams, our goals, our faith, even when we encounter obstacles. Just like that mustard seed, even in the face of adversity, there's the potential for incredible growth and transformation.
It's so easy to get caught up in the what ifs
Yeah.
and the fears of failure. But this parable, I think it encourages us to focus on the possibilities,
Yeah.
that potential for good that exists even in the smallest of beginnings.
It's a shift in perspective, isn't it?
Ah.
Instead of saying, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
We can ask ourselves, what if it does?
What if that small act of kindness sparks a chain reaction?
Yeah.
What if that seed of faith that we plant takes root and grows into something beautiful?
Yeah, what if by embracing the power of small beginnings,
Yeah.
we become part of something much bigger than ourselves?
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Those are great questions to consider.
Mhm.
And they remind me of another key aspect of the mustard seed parable that we haven't touched on yet,
Oh, okay.
which is the element of surprise.
Oh,
You know?
Tell me more.
Well, think about it. The people who first heard this parable would have been familiar with mustard seeds. They knew how tiny they were. So when Jesus described this minuscule seed growing into the largest plant in the garden, it would have been unexpected, surprising even.
It's like saying, don't underestimate the power of the unexpected.
Right.
God often works in ways that defy our expectations and limited understanding.
Exactly. And that element of surprise, that sense of awe and wonder is a key part of faith, right? It's about being open to the possibility that God can do far more than we can ask or imagine, even through the seemingly insignificant.
It's a reminder to stay curious, to be open to new possibilities, and to never underestimate the power of even the smallest acts of faith, kindness, and love.
That's beautifully said.
Thank you.
And it makes me think about how we as humans tend to want to control everything, right? Have all the answers, predict the outcomes. But faith requires a certain level of surrender, letting go of our need to be in control, trusting that God has a bigger plan.
It's about embracing the mystery,
Yeah.
the unknown, and having faith that even when we don't understand, God is working.
And sometimes I think the most beautiful growth happens in those unexpected places, in those moments where we let go of our own agendas and allow God to lead the way.
That's beautiful. It's like saying, let's be surprised by God. Let's be open to the possibility that even in the midst of our ordinary lives, extraordinary things can happen.
And it makes me think about all the ways that God might be working in our lives right now, in ways that we might not even be aware of. You know, those small seeds of hope, of love, of faith that he's planting in our hearts, in the world around us.
Beautiful. It's a reminder to pay attention,
Yeah.
to be present to the small moments of grace and beauty that surround us each day. Because even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, God is still at work, bringing forth new life and growth, often in the most unexpected places.
And maybe, just maybe, if we open our hearts and minds to the possibility, we might just be surprised by the incredible things God can do,
Yeah,
even through our small and imperfect efforts.
that's a beautiful thought.
It is. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to that question you posed earlier about the seeds we're planting in the world.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a powerful image to consider.
It is a question that each of us has to answer for ourselves, isn't it?
No.
What are the seeds of kindness, compassion, justice, and hope that we're planting in our own lives and in the world around us?
And what kind of growth might those seeds lead to if we nurture them with faith and intention?
Those are questions worth pondering. You know, this whole deep dive has reminded me that even though the parable of the mustard seed is ancient, its message is incredibly relevant for us today.
Right.
It's a call to action, you know.
Yeah.
It's an invitation to embrace the power of small beginnings and to trust in God's ability to bring forth extraordinary growth, you know, from seemingly insignificant seeds.
It's a reminder that we all have a part to play, right?
Yeah.
In making the world a better place, and that even our smallest efforts can make a difference. Yeah, and it's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by the state of the world, right? But this parable reminds us that we don't have to solve every problem,
Right.
you know, single-handedly. We can just focus on planting those mustard seeds, trusting that God will use them to create something beautiful, you know?
Exactly. It's about being faithful in the small things, knowing that our seemingly insignificant acts of kindness and love and service can contribute to a much larger tapestry, I guess, of goodness and grace.
That's a beautiful image, like a tapestry,
Yeah.
all woven together by countless small acts of faith and compassion.
Yeah. It makes me think about how each of us has a unique thread, you know, to contribute to that tapestry.
Right.
Our gifts and talents and passions, even when offered in small and humble ways, can add beauty and richness to the world around us.
And even though we might not always see the full picture,
Right.
we can trust that God is weaving those threads together into something magnificent.
Yeah. It's like a reminder that we're not alone in this journey, are we? We're part of a larger story, the divine tapestries that's constantly being woven and unfolded through the efforts of countless individuals who choose to live out their faith in everyday acts of love and service.
Yeah, and it's inspiring to think about the potential for good, you know, that exists when we all kind of embrace that mindset.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. Starting with this simple story of a tiny seed, we've explored themes of faith and growth and resilience and the power of small beginnings.
It's amazing how such a short parable can contain so much wisdom and depth.
Right.
It's a reminder that even the most familiar stories can offer fresh insights and inspiration when we take the time to really kind of delve into their meaning.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. What seeds are you planting in the garden of your life and in the world around you?
Yeah. What small acts of kindness, compassion, or courage can you offer today?
And how might those seeds, nurtured by faith and intention, grow into something beautiful and transformative?
Keep diving deep and never underestimate the power of small beginnings.
Until next time.